Where leaders go, learning follows. Harvard Business School Executive Education offers more than 60 in person and virtual programs. Learn more and apply at hbs.me/go. That's hbs.me/go.
Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Maricella Herrera and Megan Oliver. Hi everybody, it's Megan here. Just Megan, no Maricella today. She is on a well-deserved vacation in Cancun right now. Not to say I'm jealous, but I'm jealous. So it's just me. So I figured I would go over what we usually do at the end of the episode right up front so that you can know right off the top who is making history and what's going on at Ellevate this week. And then we will cut straight into the interview. So as always, we have our weekly Ellevate Roundtable on Thursday. We are going to be talking about in-depth answers to creating a stellar resume. Huge deal right now. I know that with everything going on, there's a lot of people searching for a new job or freshening up their resume just in case, or maybe they're wanting to leave a job that is not the right fit for them. Do be sure to come on Thursday to that. Totally virtual. So wherever you are, come on by. We've also got our community circles going on. Our parents and caregivers are meeting this Wednesday. So that's today. And then next Tuesday are each for our 40 plus professionals and one for our Black Women Plus of Ellevate Network. So if you're a member of any or all of those groups, feel free to come by, chat. I run the LGBTQ one, which we just had our most recent one. It was amazing. If you weren't there, be sure to come by. Community circles are just a really great place to come and connect with your community and people that have a similar experience to yours and just find strength in it. They're amazing. We also have some in-person events coming up. Today, our Pittsburgh chapter is hosting a happy hour all about networking and making way for the blue skies of springtime. I know that if you're on the East Coast like me and our Pittsburgh team, it doesn't seem like the blue skies of springtime right now, but it's coming, I promise. Our Austin chapter is also having a happy hour all about being inspired and celebrating International Women's Day. Our Miami chapter is meeting today to also have a happy hour. Lots of happy hours today. Whoop, whoop. They're talking about financial wellness, how to get it and sustain it without stress. On Friday, our Fairfield Westchester chapter is having a breakfast and coffee in person. And next Tuesday, our San Francisco chapter is also having a happy hour. So if you are in any of those areas, please feel free, come by. You can find out more details on the site. That's elevatenetwork.com, Ellevate with 2 L's. And just come on by if you're part of any of those communities, or if you just happen to be in the area that day. We want you to come. We want you to join us. We also have our history makers, which again, if you stick around for the end of the show, you know we do every single week. We talk about people who have made history. And so I'm going to go over them this week. We have to start, of course, with none other than Michelle Yeoh, who became the first Asian woman to win Best Actress at the Oscars. Amazing, amazing performance, amazing actress, amazing person, just all around. I think this is like her third time being mentioned this year in our History Maker segment because she keeps setting history, and I'm not mad about it. Keep making history and we will keep bringing you up. Gloria Gilmer became the first Black woman mathematician to have research papers in the Library of Congress. Iwen Chu became the first Asian American woman to be elected to the New York State Senate. Amanda Dotseth became the first woman appointed director of SMU's Meadows Museum. Jessie Fuentes became the first woman and youngest alderperson to lead Chicago's 26th ward, and Major General Paula Lodi became the first woman to be promoted to active duty general in the Medical Service Corps. So amazing. Congratulations to all of those women making history. Keep an eye on our social media. We're at Ellevate Network, pretty much everywhere you can find us. And we spotlight these amazing women and more all the time. And now we're going to go ahead and go to our interview with Leslie Wingo. She's the CEO of Sanders Wingo, an independent advertising agency founded in 1958, specializing in multicultural marketing that speaks to its audiences, not at them. She's also a DEIB strategic consultant and a frequent speaker on how to build an environment where diversity is normal so that everyone is able to contribute to their brilliance and their view. So let's go ahead and cut to Maricella's interview with Leslie now.
very happy today to be here with Leslie Wingo, who is a DIB solutions expert. And we know that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm sure I'm going to have tons of questions. But the first one, as always, Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to what you're doing now?
Sure. My name is Leslie Wingo. I am originally from El Paso, Texas, born and raised. And I cut my teeth in advertising, and I had been doing that for, as my daughter would say, 2 decades. And I tell her to stop with her fancy math all the time. But for over 20 years, I've been doing advertising and comms work. And a business coach of mine, her name is Janet, suggested that I do a TEDx. And I said to Janet, nobody wants to hear me talk for 20 minutes. And she said, well, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. And you should talk about yourself and your experiences and see what happens. So what I did is I put together a TEDx talk, and it's about 12 minutes. And it is about me, but it's about my experience growing up in El Paso, being the only one who looked like me, an African American female, how that looked as I moved forward in my career, and then also in my neighborhoods and C-suite. Uh, and what was great about it is I wanted people to listen to understand and not defend it while I was presenting it, because some of the information in the TEDx is not it's heavy, but I didn't want anybody to feel like they were getting punched. So after it was over, TEDx I did at TEDx El Paso. They did a beautiful job filming it and recording it, and they published it. And I said to my mother, "Look at this TEDx and tell me if it's good." She said, "It's good." I said, "Is it good because it's good, or is it good because you're my mama and you say it's good?" She goes, "No, it's good." So I had another friend of mine, her name is Erica, look at it. She goes, "You need to release this and release it now." So that was in 2019. And it was about what we're now calling diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And what is interesting for me is that the conversations that I was having around advertising and African American consumers and what does that look like after the social or the summer of social reckoning in 2020, the conversation
Mhm.
shifted to what is this diversity, equity, inclusion thing? How do I take responsibility for my part in it? Better yet, do I have responsibility in any of this conversation? And as a white male, because most of them were white men, I don't want to screw it up. And so that's what got me into doing the diversity work full time, also doing comms work, but doing it through the lens of storytelling. So people, with that same intention, I want people to listen to understand and not defend it. Because if I can get somebody to understand what's going on, then we can talk about how do we change things.
Powerful how one person's suggestion of, you should do this thing
Hmm.
turns into something so much bigger. How did you get out of your head when you were like, nobody wants to listen to me for 20 minutes? Like, how did you manage to get yourself out of your head? Because I,
Oh,
I, I feel like we do this a lot as women. Like, no,
hmm.
no, 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 I have nothing to say, but that's not true.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous question, and I will tell you exactly what happened. I was stuck in my head. I wrote the TEDx probably 3 different times. Maybe it was more like 5 times. And my friend Janet, she's also a business coach, said, "Let me tell you about yourself." And so she walked me through some of the things that I've done. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And I forgot about that. I forgot about that." So that was part of it. And I think the second part of it was having coffee with a friend, and she said, how do you want people to feel when they walk away from your presentation? What color is it? I'm like, that is a strange question, but I'm gonna work with it. I said yellow because yellow is happy and you feel something when you see yellow. It's not red, it's not green, it's not this, red. It's yellow. It's a wonderful place to be. So between talking to Janet and figuring out how I wanted to shape the conversation and have impact in it, that's how I got out of my head. And then I rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and did the rehearsal in front of people who knew me very well to tell me where the gaps were. If I hadn't had their feedback, that the TEDx would not have been as powerful as it was.
I love that so much. I mean, you had Janet who basically put a mirror up for you
Hmm. Hmm.
and like showed you some things you weren't seeing, which is so important that we have those people in our lives. And then your friend's question is a fantastic question. I'm going to use that going
Hmm.
forward.
Hmm. I think it's it. For me, what it did is it reframed how I was looking at what I wanted to say. And I don't it for some reason it worked in my brain. Hopefully it'll work in somebody else's brain as well. But the it's if you see for me, if I see the problem or see what I'm trying to solve a little differently, then that's where inspiration can come from. It's kind of like walking through the streets of New York and it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me dig into that. So yeah, it was a great experience. I'm glad I did it. I would love to do another one, but not anytime soon. It was a lot of work.
I really want to do one someday. Someday. Should apply. So I want to go back. You said you want people to listen to understand and not defend. And
Mhm,
that's your, not just it was for the TED Talk, but currently with your practice, this is how you approach things.
mhm.
That sounds really, really hard.
It
Like,
is
how do
really
you
hard.
get people to actually listen to understand?
Well, so I have this incredible responsibility in my head. It's a responsibility. I need to honor where I came from and who I am, but I also need to be the voice of the employee, and I also need to be
Mhm.
the voice of the C-suite. And C-suite folks, some of them are very new to this conversation, even though I'm 50 years old, I've been living with it my whole life, right? So they're very new to, oh, there's a different possibility than what I've experienced. And employees want C-suite to make a lot of changes. I feel that the responsibility is not only on C-suite, but it's also on employees. C-suite
Mhm.
can't do things that are, these magical things are going to happen overnight. And it's going to, sometimes it's going to take time. And the example that I give is when I was a kid in the 70s, there was this big discussion about pronouns. Do we call them the chairwoman of the board or the chairman of the board? Why don't we just call them the chairman? That's what they are. And there was a lot of mental exercise to shift our mindsets from just making the assumption that everybody wanted to be referred to as male. I am now 50 years old, and from when I was a kid, we'll say 10 to where we are now, that's 40 years of practicing and creating a new reality, a new possibility, new opportunities where I don't even have to think about it. I don't even have to exercise that muscle any longer. So what I want when I talk to people, when I talk to employees, there's this desire, we want to have change happen right now. We need to have it
Mhm.
happen right now. And I don't disagree with some of that. But I also think we need, as employees, you have to be responsible that we want to build something that's long term and not something that's going to wear off like a sugar rush. We don't want it to be this thing where it's a set aside or it's once a month. If we want it ingrained in the culture, we're going to have to take our time to do it. And we cannot have these big changes happen overnight. I wish we could, but that's just people hate two things, changing the way things are. And we're very resistant as humans to cause change. On the other side, for C suite, they have to be open to possibilities that they've never considered before, right? Some things that they never knew were offensive. They are terrified of being called a racist, or they just don't get it, a sexist, right? All the S words.
Mhm.
And if we want real solutions that are going to live beyond my lifetime, we also have to invite these folks into the conversation and meet them where they are, not where we think they should be, because that's a learning curve, and that's a curve that they may not be ready to make the jump. And so that's when I listen for understanding and not defending. That's what I mean. It's patiently walking through a lot of different things to get to the same common result, which we all want, which is positive change as we move forward, not only for us but also for our kids and their kids as well.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, it's bringing people along,
Hmm.
kind of, in both from both sides. And I agree with you. Change cannot happen just from the employees and cannot happen just from the C-suite. It has to be both. There's an aspect of change coming from the top and an aspect of change. The actual culture is made by employees, right?
Hmm.
It is not something that we just someone writes down and that's what it is.
Exactly, exactly. And it's interesting when I talk to founders and they have a perception of what the culture is, and then when I talk to employees, their perception of culture is not the same as founder. And so that's where the interesting conversations about what is culture, what should it be, what is this thing, this inclusion thing that we keep talking about, our culture of belonging. What does all of that mean as my company grows or my company changes, evolves, and how do I make sure I'm in tune with what my employees are saying, but at the end of the day I still have this company that I have to run, and I have to be responsible for all these other things. And so it's a delicate balance of making sure that people are having those conversations so they can cause change or create what they never thought was possible, which I also think is pretty exciting as well.
Interesting. So I understand the fact that they could have different perspectives because sometimes founders are not in the day-to-day weeds, and also sometimes if you're in the C-suite, people just don't tell you stuff.
Right, right.
I mean,
It's interesting, right? So this one CEO, we did some work, and he thought he had built this inclusive culture, and it wasn't a quote unquote, as he called it, a bro culture. But when you talk to the female employees, they're like, "Oh, it's very much a bro culture," and then they outlined what was missing for them. And then having that conversation with CEO to, "Oh, I didn't even know this was happening. I didn't even know this was going on. What do we need to do to be better?" And that is an excellent place to be because everybody's being heard, everybody's being seen, conversations are being valued across the company.
how do you make sure that you are getting that information though?
It's as marketers, we're taught to take friction out of the process so people are more engaged very quickly.
Mhm.
And to do this work, there's a lot of friction in the process because we actually reach out and we talk to people and have one-on-ones. It's more than just a focus group, and it's more than just one meeting. It happens over time, and it happens, what's the word, it's iterative, I think that's the word, where we continue to have these conversations to see what's missing, to see what people like, because it's not all bad, right? Some of the stuff that's
Right.
happening is quite incredible, or sometimes things are happening in companies that companies don't even take credit for, but the employees are appreciative of those things. So we've got to talk about the thing and put a lot more friction into the system. And when we put that friction in and understand where people are come from and do it in a way where we can understand them, then we can have conversation, and it's not this back and forth and nothing gets done, because that's just wasting calories. We only have so many calories we can burn in a day. So how do we be very strategic about these things that we're doing?
What I was going to ask you kind of counter goes against this because I was going to ask, like, are there kind of general trends you see?
Like trends in companies or
Right, in companies where, like, these are more of or I guess trends in, like, these are areas of where you should think about when you are trying to build a culture of belonging, that you're seeing are probably missed currently.
I think to have a culture of belonging, when I talk about it with my business partner, she and I talk about it. It's people want to be seen, valued, and heard. Right?
Mhm.
This is the cornerstone of culture of belonging, and to do that, we're going to have conversations. And to do that, we're actually going to have to listen to what people say, not just assume what we want them to say to be true. And so the trend that I'm seeing is that C suite is very interested because they want to do these things, which I think is great. I think C suite is also coming to the realization that they cannot be all things to all people and to all
Mhm.
causes and to all things. So, where are they going to firmly stand in this conversation around equity, inclusion, belonging, diversity, accessibility, right? Where are they going to firmly stand and make a difference? Because if they try and do everything, they're not going to. It's going to get watered down. And who are they talking to? Let's talk about thought leadership and what are they writing about. And so there's a lot of ways to think about it, but I think from a trend perspective, the other thing that I'm seeing, which I'm pretty excited about, is that human resources, this thing is not just a human resources thing, it's across the company, which I also think is quite beautiful. Because if I had looked at this work in 2020, the conversations I was having was mostly with chief people officers and human resources, and what do we need to do to hire more people that look like X, Y, and Z. And we weren't talking about culture. And the last thing I'll say is I worked with this planner, and she said in the United States, Leslie, for the most part, let's just assume for the most part people speak English. I'm like, okay, we can assume that. She goes, we may all speak English, but we do not all speak the same culture. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I'm going to use that every time I talk about culture.
That's an excellent excellent analogy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're seeing more people in the organization get involved. You're seeing it's not just an HR trend, which I love hearing that. I also believe HR is just so in the past in a way.
Right. Uh-huh. I agree with this. I want companies to treat HR like it's its own incredible brand that is the
Right.
star of the show. They make so much magic happen behind the scenes where problems are anticipated before they're problems, and they can talk about the company in a beautiful way that as a marketer I could never do that, but human resources can. So let's treat them like, give them their own brand and give them some light to shine in because they should be shining in that light to have these conversations.
And when you say that C-suite executives are thinking more of like where specifically, if they try to do everything, they're going to be watered down. I
Mhm.
completely agree with that. You can't be everything to all people. But where, like, can you give me a specific example of like what these things that, okay, now I'm focusing on X versus focusing on just doing a bunch of random little things?
Sure. So when I talk to my clients, I usually give them these big examples. So one of my favorites is Netflix, and from a storytelling perspective. So they create all of
Mhm.
these beautiful stories. They curate all of these different things. And oh, by the way, here's our collection of during Black History Month. That's great. It's not a one off, it's something that's done over time, but it's all under their umbrella of storytelling. Now, if they want, Google, on the other hand, they did an incredible job. I think it was in 2018, telling story like the number ones, the number one, the most searched performer, the most search speech, and they told a story using the data that they have, right? So if you go into Google and you want to, if you're looking for a sponsorship for the arts, typically they don't do that because their focus primarily is on tech, and that's where they sponsor. Netflix is all about storytelling. And so that just becomes a different opportunity. Now, when I look at employees, those companies are very different. I think for
Right.
employees, it gets complicated because what they see on the outside may not necessarily match what's happening on the inside. And I think that's where the opportunity is. If we're going to celebrate Black History Month, then what does that look like externally? And then what does that look like internally? uh, are we going to celebrate Black History Month internally? And is it going to be this one month, this 28 days? Are we going to look at other times throughout the year? Are we going to change our logo so it looks like Black History Month, and then it looks like Pride, and then it looks like and it looks like and it
Oh
looks like
God.
exactly? So are we going to pink wash it and green wash it? Are we
Yeah.
actually going to do something meaningful? And so I think if companies can commit to and stand in what they want to cause and change and be authentically who they are, then we have a different conversation than we're going to change our logo, or we're going to put a meaningless post on Twitter when something bad happens even though it doesn't go anywhere. It's moving past all of the lip service and actually getting into the thing and getting messy with it to come out on the other side.
Which is scary, right?
I
It's
know.
not easy.
It is
But
scary.
that's where change happens.
Right. And I think it becomes like, what is your level of risk? If you can tell me what your level of risk is or how risk averse you are, then we can have a real honest conversation. But if we're not going to have an honest conversation, then this diversity conversation, the equity and conversation, you're going to have it again next year and you're not going to move any needles.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes performative and people don't believe
Yeah.
you and you erode trust and your employees don't believe you and they leave.
Hmm. And they go find something else because if they feel like they fit into the culture, they're more willing to stay, even more so than money, is what I've been reading. If you can make
Yep.
somebody feel like they're part of it, then yeah, they're going to stay. They're vested. If you're just giving them money and throwing money at a problem, then why would they stay?
Yeah, someone else got to throw money. It is
Yeah,
about building that relationship with your employees in a way that they know they're cared for, they know they belong, and they know they can trust you.
right. And I think trust is so interesting because they have to be able to trust you not only when things are good, but also when things get messy
Right.
and complicated. And I think that's where things start to get interesting. I have one client uh, who their CEO felt very comfortable responding after George Floyd. However, as a brand, the brand did not respond because they're two very different. They were intentional about it being very two different things, two different people. And so
Right.
the employees knew where the CEO was coming from. However, the company wanted to be more thoughtful on how they responded and gave themselves time and space to figure out what that looked like responsibly. And I think that's a brilliant way to do it. If it works for that brand. If it doesn't work for that brand, then we got to talk about, well, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and keep moving and pushing from there.
That's an interesting example because I feel like in many ways when the CEO speaks out and the brand, they're so intertwined,
Hmm.
right? Brand and leadership. And people are looking for leaders that inspire them. They
Hmm.
are looking for leaders that are competent and that stand for things and not just wishy-washy, you know, kind of
Hmm.
go with the flow. So it's interesting to think about this client of yours where they actually separated those two.
They separated them, and somebody said on a call to me, outrage does not have to be yelling. Outrage can be
Right.
something very different. I was like, ooh, that's good too. I never thought about it that way. And so where the CEO can stand in front of a town hall and be empathetic, the brand may need to take time and space to say,
Yeah.
instead of investing $10 million towards these things, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're committed to, and this is how we're going to do it. I think that's more impactful in it, and it's responsible and it's accountable, and people can actually see it happening in real time, not just wishing it would.
It's a great conversation to have. I mean, look, I've been working for Ellevate for 10 years. So
Mhm.
I've been in this kind of space for a while. And when people come to me and are kind of like baffled by the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and to some it's still just diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
Um, I'm like, yeah, 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 okay. You're a little late to the game, but okay, let's
Mhm.
go. Let's
Mhm.
start. Um, Now I'm fearful though,
Yeah.
because is it true that I don't know. This is where the cynic in me comes in
Oh, I love
because
it. Yeah.
I want to believe with my whole heart that the work we're doing, and I'm putting myself in kind of your bucket here too,
Mhm. Mhm.
that the work we're doing to change culture is going to make a huge difference. And I believe for many reasons it can. I believe in the new next generation that's coming into the workplace, bringing tons of change with it. So God bless Gen Z.
Mhm.
But I keep hearing too the outcries of recession, layoffs. Uh, the bottom line is screaming for our attention.
Mhm.
So will we see backwards movement in these efforts instead of forward movements in these efforts?
I think it's a great question, and it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. I think part of it is, I live in Texas, so part of it is definitely a political conversation where some politicians don't want to have these conversations about what it
Mhm.
is, what caused it, the systems that are in place. If the systems are in place and not changing those systems because it was never built for a population like that, they don't want to have those conversations. So then, what do we do if the government is to steal from one of them is stuck in this idea of woke culture and what that means versus the work that we're doing? They're not the
Right.
same. They are not the same. And when we talk about
No.
diversity and equity and inclusion, it's not about the check the box moments that happen on the census. It's bigger than that. And so I, like you, I'm concerned because when things get tough, the first thing that usually go are the things that are not contributing to the bottom line. So marketing, advertising dollars, let's cut that. These benefits things we don't need, let's cut that. But
Mhm.
I think we have to figure out what the return on investment is when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And when we look at employees and trying to recruit talent, top talent, different talent, whatever kind of talent we want for an organization, this becomes a very strong tool if it's done correctly. And then you get the best of the best. And it's not just this one, you're either one thing or the other. My kids are half black, half Hispanic, female. I have a daughter and a son. They're not just one thing. They're a duality of a lot of things. And so there has to be a shift from looking at people like they're zeros and ones to the reality of we're all a bunch of different things, and that is okay to be, and it is okay to be different. That is wonderful. But do we have a lot of work to do? Yeah, absolutely.
So, but make it human first.
Got to be human. If it's not, and it's interesting when I set up conversations, I don't refer to consumers as consumers or targets. I refer to them as human beings because no one wants to be a target. And I want you to see me for exactly who I am. So the assumption should never be made that I'm going to behave a certain way because other people behave that way. That's not true. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And it's a false story.
Yeah. So I love that you said woke culture is not the same as the work we're doing. It's not the same as the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it. So I'm not sure how far I can go down the political rabbit hole. So cut me off if I go too far.
Hey, I'm. This is. Don't worry.
Okay. So it's interesting. I was talking to a potential client about this the other week, and there is a narrative going around woke culture and critical race theory.
Mhm.
And my frustration with both of those things is what is woke culture and what is critical race theory? So let's define what those things are first. I think for politicians, it becomes this mental shortcut for the way things were versus the way things could be. And the way things could be look very different than the way things are right now. And I think that's scary. Going back to what I said, people hate to things changing the way things are. Let's keep things the way they are because then we don't have to deal with any of it. But there are stories that have not been told or things that have been swept under the rug for whatever those reasons are. And so for me, woke culture, if you will, is not these mental shortcuts. It is digging deep into history, winners, losers, however we want to frame it, and understanding why things happened the way they did. Why did we redline cities? Right? Why I live in Austin, Texas. Why is there's certain parts of the city that are still dealing with the impact of those redlining, those neighborhoods that have been redlined. Critical race theory is also a mental shortcut that, from what I understand it to be, is something that came out of a legal department, maybe out of the University of Texas Law School. I don't know. But CRT is not the same thing as teaching history. And we can't negate what happened and pretend like it didn't cause any problems because
Right.
it did. And we have a responsibility not just to ourselves but to the people that are the people that we're raising to lead the future. We have a responsibility to them. I think one of the things that I did, probably this was in my younger, probably in the early twos, I went to Germany, and I went. I'll never do it again, but I did go to a concentration camp. And the Germans, what they have done very well is they will not forget, at least when I was there,
Mhm.
what they did or what happened and how they are causing change. They take full responsibility for what happened for the most part. If we don't take full responsibility here in the United States for what happened or what we did or what we caused, it may not be our fault, but it certainly is our responsibility to own what happened to cause positive change. If we don't understand why there's food deserts, then how do healthcare companies cause positive change when there's not grocery stores in certain neighborhoods? So I think it is important that we not use mental shortcuts like woke culture and CRT to make it a negative, but really dig into what are these things. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We got to put some friction back in the systems. Life is not 140 characters or less, and it's not about clips from politicians. I mean, real life takes more work than that. And I think we should invest in ourselves to understand what we want to create and cause. I was on a soapbox. Sorry.
I love it. I've said this many times in this podcast, and it does come from how I grew up. And I'm from El Salvador, big background, but those who don't know their history are bound to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding of what history has caused
Mm-hmm.
is the only way we can actually change things.
I agree with that 100%. I was listening. There was a school somewhere in this. I want to think they were in the South, a high school, and one of the administrators said he felt uncomfortable talking about slavery. And I, as an African American female, I'm like, if this is the first time you felt uncomfortable, imagine being Black for 50 years in the United States and that and having this conversation. Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. Is it going to be fun? Absolutely not. But what if we set it up so that never happened again? I think that would be a better place to stand in than I feel uncomfortable, so we're not going to do anything about it.
Oh, yeah. That's like you said before, imagining how things could be.
Right.
I know we've gone down this political rabbit hole a little bit, and so I'm going to ask you something that's out of my own curiosity,
Okay.
because I've been reading about the fact that the Supreme Court is going to hear on affirmative action,
Mhm.
which to me is, again, are we going backwards?
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm bringing it up just to get your thoughts on it because it's something I've been thinking about as we're planning a lot of our content for our big summit this year, and it's every year there's things that are coming up, and I honestly hadn't heard about the fact that they were going to listen, or that they were going to um go into affirmative action and what that means, and if it should be or not be a thing. And when I saw it, I was like, what?
Mhm. I feel, and I heard that there's two types of change. There's transactional and transformational. Transactional are the things that we can count and measure. Transformational are the things that we can feel that take a long time, but we're causing change. For affirmative action, is it the best solution? Probably not. But
Right.
we still need to know where we stand and measure things, because if we don't know what to measure, or if we don't have anything to measure, then we don't know if we've moved the needle. And when affirmative action was created in my head, so I have to do some research because I don't know if this is true. It seemed like it was, how many people of this certain demographic are we hiring based on the 1972 census, and then we
Hmm.
need you to report your numbers. But the conversation we're having now, it's bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. And I want my kid, whoever they want to be when they grow up, to be able to go into a job and be who they are and it be okay. And affirmative action is part of that. We have to be able to measure what we can see.
Yeah.
Transformationally, that's tough. I think it goes, to give people a different example. When I was a kid, I remember you could smoke in a restaurant, even though there was a smoking and
I
non-smoking
know.
section, right? It's gross.
Yeah, I was remembering that the other day.
You could smoke in an airplane. I mean, who
Mhm.
smokes in an airplane now? Yeah. Anyway, um, so the transactional piece of that is we can measure how many people are causes of lung cancer. What does that look like? How many cigarettes are sold? And there's a bunch of variables that go into this stuff, but that's for data. For somebody who studies data. The transformational piece of that, though, is I was with my kids and we were walking down the street in Chicago, and my daughter said, "Oh my God, that guy is smoking. Gross." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can't measure that. I can't measure that." But now I have this baseline, like, hopefully she'll never pick up a cigarette, because this is a good thing. This is fine. And I think most of us can agree smoking is not good for you. It's not.
I love that example. I mean, it's very clear.
Yeah, it was very clear. And I wasn't embarrassed, but then I was like, maybe a little bit. But it was great. It was great. I'll never see that guy again. It was fine.
And you shouldn't be smoking.
No, you shouldn't be smoking. It's bad for you.
Leslie, this has been so much fun. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to get into the lightning round. So just
Fun.
a few questions.
Okay.
Nothing too serious.
I'm ready
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
to be invisible.
Huh, interesting.
Hmm. I would want to know what
What's
people
a
are
skill
talking
you
about.
wish?
Yeah, I want to know what people are saying about me when I'm not in the room. I don't know, but invisible would be
I
kind of
don't know
cool.
if I would want to know.
I want to know what my
I mean,
kids
I
are
guess if
saying
it's
for sure.
important information.
Yeah. Okay, I'll behave. I'll behave.
No
Okay.
need. What's the most used app on your phone?
Instagram.
Hmm. What's a skill you wish you had?
I wish I was a mechanic so I could fix cars.
Oh, that's a good one.
I
I've
would
never
love to
heard
know.
that
I
one.
would love to be able to go into an engine and figure out what was wrong with it and put it back together. That would make me happy.
Favorite mythical creature?
So I thought it would be a liger, but my kids have since told me ligers are real things. So mythical creatures, I'm gonna steal a little bit. I think Marvin the Martian.
Oh, he was cute.
Yeah.
Um, best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Best. Oh, this is my grandfather told me once, and I'll have to figure out how to translate this for my children, but don't let anybody else write your checks. You need to write your own checks. Meaning don't let people dip into your account. You need to be responsible for it and pay your money to the people that you have money to.
Hmm, I like that one.
Mhm.
And finally, what's one thought you'd want to leave with our listeners?
My favorite thought, and for people to noodle on, is people hate two things: change in the way things are. I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
really like that one.
Hmm. That's my
Really,
favorite.
really. Well, thank you, Leslie.
No, I thank you. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Join an exceptional peer group to sharpen your leadership skills and advance your career. Harvard Business School Executive Education now offers in-person and virtual programs. Learn more at hbs.me/go. That's hbs.me/go. Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Katherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.